Good evening, everyone. I'm Sundara. Welcome all of you to another informative session organized by Department of Computer Engineering, University of Peradeniya. To introduce our guest speaker today, Mr. Jayaratna, who is a proud alumni of our department, who is currently working as a biomedical engineer at Marks Institution, Western Sydney University, Australia. Today, we will have a session discussing about the challenges in developing products for healthcare industry. Mr. Jayaratna, welcome to the session, and the platform is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I'll start straight away and go for my presentation. I'll share the slides. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good. I'll start the slideshow. All right, so that's the topic, challenges in developing products for the healthcare industry. And the lessons I personally learned through past few years, because I have been working closely with this area, this biomedical engineering area. And little bit background about myself. I was a student there at the Department of Computer Engineering from 2011 to 2015. And just after that, I started working as a temporary instructor and temporary lecturer at the same department, and started applying for PhD scholarship and master's scholarship as well. It was quite a time actually for about 1 year, I guess. So I applied to UK, Europe, Malaysia, Thailand, and Australia, few universities, and finally got a scholarship, project scholarship, which is titled as Targeted Therapy for Sleep Apnea. So sleep apnea is a condition is related to sleep, where people can't sleep properly. They have disturbed sleep, and you will see a lot of slides regarding this because that's related to my research. And it was a project scholarship, and I finished my PhD at 2020 and worked multiple research assistant positions on research grants in the same uni, and now working as a biomedical engineer at the Marks Institute. So Marks Institute is part of Western Sydney University. And this is a background about the talk, what I'm going to give. And for the past 5 years, because that's the experience I have, they have developed this biomedical group at the Marks Institute. They have developed wearable and sensing solutions for patients, general public, and for animal use. And we have recently started to expand, and our aim is to be the hub of translational research in Western Sydney region. That means we would like to do research and also make products out of those research. And we would like to be example as well. And initially, these products were developed as a research products. So some PhD projects and also postdoctoral research, and much of them are through grants. And we aim to conduct clinical trials, capture data, and publication. That's the purpose of research publication. So that was the aim when we are in the research stage. And when we want to convert this into research products into commercially viable, sellable, marketable products, there were a lot of challenges. One reason, there's different philosophies in where we are doing research and when we are translating towards marketing or selling things. So there's different philosophies. And there was lack of experience among ourselves as well, because you can't be an expert in just 2-3 years. It takes time, and it takes a lot of failures on the way as well. And this talk will cover the problems and lessons we have learned. I hope this would help for your innovative career as well. And our research, so I'll show like 2 videos. I hope the sound is shared. Yeah. And those 2 videos, one is Professor Paul Breen at Biomed Group demonstrating HEMO at Liverpool Hospital. The HEMO is a blood flow monitor where you can wear at your leg. I'll play these 2 short videos.
I think the sound is not shared.
Okay.
Diabetes, and in Sydney
Is it shared now?
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Southwest, cases are surging. Now, Liverpool Hospital and Western Sydney University have developed a world-first device to combat a major complication.
Caesar Sevenini knows that losing a limb can be one of the terrible consequences of having long-term diabetes, so managing his condition is front of mind.
You've got to. What price do you put on your health?
Diabetes can damage the nerves and reduce blood flow in the foot.
We want to catch these people early. We want to have an early detection system in place.
That system is this, a device called HEMO that's light and inexpensive to use. The wraparound sensors act like a second skin to measure tiny pulses in the leg and identify abnormalities.
This is a prototype device that we built in the lab, but we can build them at a fairly decent scale, allowing us now to trial them in multiple clinical trials.
Currently, testing can only be done by a highly skilled clinician using ultrasound technology costing more than $200,000.
This sensor is actually disposable. It's really, really low cost.
Investigators are also looking at other applications for the device. It's being trialled in pregnant women to monitor fetal movements and to check for heart rhythm abnormalities in adults. In southwestern Sydney, diabetes has skyrocketed by over 158% in the past 2 decades. Fairfield has...
Okay. That's really touching. So I'll play the other one just to save some time.
Whether plucking hairs or threading needles, there are plenty of times when a surgeon's hand would be handy. Now Sydney scientists are showing off a high-tech glove to guide any finger through the most delicate of moves.
Right now it's a bit finicky.
Stuffed between these surgical gloves,
These things are designed to be flexible.
tiny sensors reading every fine movement.
Each of the chips provides us the 9 axes of data,
They're lightweight and won't get in the way.
and it doesn't impede the sense of feeling on the front.
Important for surgeons who use sharp tools, especially those teaching the next generation.
We're talking about one stitch here, another stitch here.
This is what stitching looks like as data.
You can see that kind of repetitive motion, and that tells you that this person is relatively experienced. They've got a relatively smooth cadence.
The same sort of technology can be found in a device like this, an iPhone, which has just one of these little sensors that records and picks up movements, so you're able to tilt and steer. For instance, in a game like Mario Kart, it gives you control of the character. But in the smart glove, there are actually 9 of these little sensors, and they have the ability to pick up more than 100 movements, 100 pieces of data every second.
And we can probably even tell if you've had too much caffeine in the morning and you're a little bit jittery. That's the kind of level we're talking about.
That's incredible.
It's going to help our surgeons, and it's going to help create more and better surgeons.
Trials start soon at Liverpool Hospital, but the tech could one day help musicians and artists.
Watch the space. We'll have more.
Tom Hartley, 7 News.
Okay. So you may have observed it doesn't connect to anywhere. Yes, that one. Yeah, this one. So it's just a prototype now. We still have to make the motherboard. It's in the production now. So it's okay for like normal people. They won't recognize. It doesn't connect to anywhere. But as you may be like little bit knowledgeable audience, so we are still in the making of the motherboard. But the data we showed there, that's from the previous generation now.
It's the highest rates.
And this is a vital monitoring T-shirt we made using conductive polymers to measure breathing pattern and pulse pattern. On the right side, we can capture breathing patterns live and pulse patterns there. So using this single sensor, and that can be embedded into a T-shirt there, which can work with normal coin cell battery or two AAA batteries or lithium polymer batteries. And that's a T-shirt. And that's the next generation of that T-shirt. That's using completely fabric sensors instead of polymer rubber sensors. So that's completely fabric there. And that can detect breathing and pulse movement as well. And this is another research area we are doing. Is for monitoring animals and their well-being. So this harness we made to monitor ECG, respiration, and temperature of working dogs. Working dogs in terms of military working dogs or police dogs. But these trials have been done on farm dogs. So there's 2 farm dogs wearing our harness, and live data from ECG respiration we can capture to a phone through Bluetooth. And the same harness is being used with detect dogs. So these small type of dogs where they use at airports to sniff and find drugs, explosives. And it's different concept. It's more about monitoring their performance during training and cues, how well they start identifying what's their behavior. And it's more towards behavior analysis. Here it's more towards their safety. And here's one more example. This is a small sensor using pressure sensors and piezo sensors, piezoelectric sensors, where we can place on the ear of a cattle and measure heartbeat and respiration through this small sensor. And also there's a millimeter wave radar sensor, where we can place about 1 meter or 2 meter away from the cow and measure their breathing and heartbeat through this radar sensor. And this is also another project we are doing where we monitor cattle in ships about how well their health is performing. So those areas are our research at Biomedical Group. There are more things, but here's like sample of that. And I'll talk about a case study. This is actually my PhD project, where we want to keep track of the sleep quality. Just take, okay. Let's say we want to track the sleep quality of people who are sleeping at night. And good sleep, how do we quantify that? If the person is having a good sleep, they'll have continuous sleep without any breaks in between, and we'll internally have, like, the brain will have different cycles, like REM sleep, light sleep, deep sleep, and it's not a single one. Will keep cycling. It will keep cycling, and the person wakes up well rested. The person will feel refreshed in the morning, and there will be minimum to no interrupts regarding any reason, regardless of breathing pattern or any other thing. So that's a sign of good sleep. And the person should normally sleep about 8 hours. That's like the standard. And heart rate and respiration slows down. so the body can rest and repair. And the bad sleep, normally they're snoring and the person wakes up feeling tired. That's because of their feeling is get interrupted. Their sleeping is getting interrupted. And there will be multiple or lot of interrupts throughout the night in terms of they'll wake up. Probably they'll know that they are waking up multiple times during the night, or they'll have no idea that they are waking up. So unless somebody is watching them and telling them you have this many interrupts, they wouldn't know. And also erratic heart rate, respiratory rate patterns. So normally they are like fairly stable, but if it goes really high at sometimes and really low at for some time, that's the problem. So those ones are good and bad sleep. So that's we know so far. And one problem is we have to identify correct proxies for sleep quality. So what do I what I'm talking about proxies is, so in human physiological measurements, we can't directly measure them. Actually, most of them we can't directly measure them. We can measure them, but we don't have that luxury of measuring them in day-to-day life or make it comfortable for the user. For example, if you say blood pressure, so by blood pressure we mean the actual blood pressure near the heart, actually inside the heart.
Recording in progress.
But we can't measure that unless we put a catheter inside and measure the pressure inside the heart. So that's not possible. So that's why we have blood pressure monitors where we use a cuff, and that's measuring blood pressure on the arm, and that pressure we use it as approximate or proxy for original heart rate. And one other good example is temperature. You might think measuring temperature is easy. It's not easy. It's very difficult. It's probably the most difficult one to monitor in people. So during COVID times, we had this requirement to monitor temperature, and we opted for those gun we measure person, somebody's pointing a gun to you, and they'll click that one and they'll measure. But that's not giving you an accurate reading, because actual real temperature of the body is a core temperature. So core means inside your body. So that again, you have to measure the core body temperature. And how to measure core body temperature? You have to take the rectal body temperature. So that means you have to insert a thermometer through a rectum and measure the inside. But you can't do that in airports or shopping malls or anywhere. So we fall into this solution where we measure skin temperature on forehead. So this we can't do. So we opted to this one. This we can do. So you have to understand in measuring physiological signals. Sometimes we have to measure something approximate and guess the original one, because we can't always measure the original parameters we were interested in. So that's something you have to know. So these are the proxy measures of sleep quality. So in terms of different organs, let's say, for heart, we can measure heart rate, how fast the heart is beating, and heart rate variability. I mean, how it's like the second derivative or first derivative of heart rate. How fast your heart rate changes, or how often your heart rate changes. Is it a constant or not constant? And measure the blood oxygen saturation that relates to heart. And relates to brain, we can measure how fast your eyes move during sleep. So that's a good indication that you are going to this rapid eye movement in your sleep. And we can measure EEG. And what does this EEG tells us? Whether the person is going to deep sleep, or is it light sleep, or the person is dreaming. That information we can get through EEG. And through respiration, there's a lot of measurements as well. Respiratory rate here, and respiratory rate variability, same as the heart rate and heart rate variability, and respiratory volume. So how much your volume changes during time. So if you inhale large volume, what's the cause, like that. And respiratory effort. Effort mean if your mouth is getting blocked, that means your airway is getting smaller. That means you need higher effort to inhale the same amount of volume as before. So your effort is again a good indication how well you breathe. And snoring, that means snoring sound as well, and airflow, actual airflow volume. And in terms of body, we can take EMG, whether you are moving your body, if you are shaking your legs during sleep, and movement. What's the sides you are sleeping? Are you changing your sleep posture often? Like those ones. So there's a lot of things to measure sleep quality, but problem is you can't measure all of these unless you connect probably about 50 wires to the patient with lot of electrodes, and you will have like gigabytes of data through these all channels. That's not possible. Obviously that's not possible through a wearable or embedded device. That's not going to work. If you want to measure all of these, you have to do it through a powered device, and you have to attach a lot of probes and electrodes to the body, lots of sensors, and the cost is high. So we have to balance. And we have to compromise something. Okay. So if we are planning to make a medical device that can measure sleep quality, so a number of sensors or measurements, that's a decision we have to take. So we know that we can't measure everything. We have to measure something. And the information, so the y-axis here is the information, and x-axis here is the number of sensors or measurements. So information will keep increasing with number of sensors, but at some point it will become flat. So there's not much information you can gather after such number of sensors. So you have to find out what's the sweet spot there. Okay. And also the cost will increase with number of sensors or measurement. So if you are planning to make a product, the final product cost will increase with number of sensors. So you can't have 0 sensors and some cost, because nobody will buy your product. So you have to have some sensors without increasing your cost too much. So that's another reason. And different sensors will cost you different amount. And discomfort to the user with number of sensors or measurements. So you can see in 0 here. So even if you don't have any sensors, there's slight discomfort, because if you are asking somebody to wear something, even without monitoring anything, there's a discomfort level, because that's not something they are normally wear. You're asking somebody to wear a device that doesn't monitor anything. There's a discomfort. That's why it is not starting at 0. So number of sensors and measurements, your discomfort increase exponentially. Okay. And also the competitive advantage of your device over other devices. So until you get to the same level as your competitors, you won't have any competitive advantage. So you have to have some sensors, and more than that sensors, to gain a competitive advantage to current market devices. So that's something you have to consider as well. Okay. So that competitive advantage start with some sort of sensor. So you can see there's a lot of things going on here. You have to balance things, you have to compromise. Okay, that's something we thought we have done. So we have made a t-shirt that uses these fabric sensors. There's like 2 tiny sensors there, and we have embedded 2 of them to measure the respiratory effort as well. And this will go around your body, same as a t-shirt, and it will expand when you're breathing, and it will expand when your heart is beating. So that can detect that as well. And it can measure a lot of parameters actually, and it can measure respiratory rate, respiratory effort, respiratory volume, heart rate variability, and activity level. We have the accelerometer on our recording device as well, recording box. So it can measure a fair big chunk of our original intended parameters, and it's very comfortable to wear compared to what's available in the market, and it's cheaper than currently available in the market. Okay, and this is where we learn our lesson. That means, yeah, your user might not be your actual user. So this term means this user means that person that pays for your device or service. So let's have a t-shirt. Somebody might be wearing that t-shirt, but he might not pay us. So I'll explain this better. So it's similar to how Facebook operates. So you may be thinking you are a Facebook user, right? But you are not a user actually. You are actually you are using it, but you are not paying for that. Who is paying for the Facebook are businesses, and they'll show advertisement to you, and all the Facebook users, they'll use Facebook service free. Businesses shows advertisement to you, and businesses pays Facebook. And when Facebook develops their product, they have to make it appeal to Facebook users as well as businesses as well, because that's their actual user, that's their clients, that's those ones are the ones who's paying Facebook. So without these businesses, Facebook would go bankrupt because users, they're not paying anything. So all the tricks Facebook is putting in Facebook website, how do they attract the users? That's for the purpose of businesses, not for any. It doesn't give any advantage to users. So it's similar to how sleep monitoring market works as well. So in Australia we have Medicare, similar to universal healthcare, like government pays for that, or we have insurance. And this is the user that's wearing our t-shirt, and he would never buy our device directly. That's not how it works. So users, they pay taxes to the government, and government pays for the doctors, hospitals, or sleep labs. That's how it works. Or user pays for insurance, and insurance then will pay for GP means the doctors here. So they'll pay the doctors, they'll pay the sleep labs. So the money works like user pays for the government or the insurance company, and insurance companies will pay either a sleep lab or a GP. So the user will go to a GP, like the doctor, and tell, I can't sleep at night, and GP will recommend something. So they'll recommend either to go to a sleep lab and do a test, or do a home sleep test. But the user, they won't buy directly from us. So this is how the money flows, and that's is quite important to know, because these technicians and doctors, they are the ones who's running the show in healthcare, and their decisions are very important. And so here in this graph, it shows appeal to the professionals, and x-axis there's number of sensors or measurements. So those professionals, I mean the technicians in sleep labs who are doing diagnosis on sleep conditions, or GPs. So until we measure some parameters, they won't care about your our invention or your invention or somebody else's invention. So they have a set of parameters they use to decide whether this person is suffering from sleep disorder. So until we satisfy these parameters, nobody would care. So the appeal to the professionals is very low. So until we show that we can measure this many parameters and they are verified through clinical trials, they won't care. And that's very important because professionals have the decision power in terms of what's offering to the users. So that's this chart is about. So regardless of how user appeal, I mean how much the user likes our device, it doesn't matter. It doesn't influence the device of choice of the professional. It's like we are going to the doctor and tells them there's this thing which I quite like, and can I wear that? It doesn't work like that. The doctor will tell them this is what they have been doing for some time, and they'll recommend some device for them, and they have to take it home, regardless of how comfortable that is, regardless of how accurate it has been proved. It doesn't matter. So they'll take professionals' advice, and professionals will decide which devices the users will use. That's how the healthcare market works. So you don't sell directly to the clients normally. And there are these standards as well about different types of sleep monitors. So I'm coming through this whole example about our development process to show you prove you some points. So there are these different types of portable monitors: type 1, type 2, type 3, and type 4, and they are in like decreasing order of number of signals. And as you can see, just here I can annotate. No, not there. Okay, looks like I can't annotate. It doesn't matter. So you can see there's thing called type 1, and there's one called oxygen saturation, type 2, and type 3, there's oxygen saturation, and type 4, there's oxygen saturation. And all of these types, these measurements, they are expecting the oxygen saturation, which we measure from PPT, pulse oximeter, where we can place on finger or foot or ear. So that thing is quite important for this sleep clinic and professionals. And we can get into this type 3 device if we include that oxygen saturation. We can't go to type 2 and type 1 with our t-shirt, but we can go into type 3 and still acceptable for them home sleep. But we didn't include this oxygen saturation. We didn't include that in the research state as well. We didn't try to make it comfortable. So in summary, our research, it was focused on making the devices comfortable to the end user. End user means the person who's wearing. But the user doesn't pay for our device or doesn't have any influence on selecting the device. So in the process of developing, we have omitted the critical parameter, SpO2, which is the oxygen saturation, and that's important to the profession. And we omitted that because of a reason. We realized with the quality of data we get from our t-shirt, that's good enough, and that would make the SPO2 redundant. But we don't have proof of that, and professionals aren't ready for that much disruptions in their area. So it makes our device less appealing to the professional. It might be appealing to the customer, but it doesn't appeal to the professional. And that's why we are currently integrating our t-shirt with the pulse oximeter, something like a watch we can wear as a separate device, and they both connect to the same smartphone. So that work is still ongoing. And that would make the device a little bit uncomfortable. So, but still that's the compromise we have to make, because that's how things work in healthcare. Okay. So that's long story about lesson 1. So it's a bit important to remember that. And the lesson 2 is about manufacturing. So manufacturing, so that means a large sign. So this is my point is that this is important that all these combine, or each of any of them. Okay. So manufacturing is more important than what your AI, what your electronics can do, or whatever the engineering approach you are using. It doesn't matter. The most important thing in this industry is manufacturing. How can you make more devices? So most of the research, so this is like a little bit of trap. So most of the research, they are done with tens of devices, because this is how things work. We make a device, test that one, test the functionality, and go apply for clinical trial, make tens of devices, probably 20, 30, 50, or probably 100, and do clinical trials, prove that our device is working. At the earliest stage of this development, all the devices are like hand assembled, probably inside the lab. And this assembly and production, that costs money, and it can easily add up into undesirable levels. And we don't realize this because we are getting paid anyway. So we are not getting paid to make this device, we are getting paid to do research. But making device is part of the research, but we don't think it as an additional cost. But in reality, that's something that costs money. So if you want to do the production here in Australia, that costs a lot of money actually. So assembly and production, it costs money. And it's very important that you consider how each of these components should be manufactured in scale. Scale means how can you make 1,000 of these devices? And how can you make 10,000? How can you make 100,000? Do you have a way to make these devices? Because if you put this into a market or start selling, you have to keep making. You can't say, customer, we are still making this, we don't have enough manpower and things. Those are not excuses. You will just go bankrupt. So it's very important that you figure out how can you make thousands of these ones. If somebody from another university comes and asks you another 100 for their clinical trial, can you make that 100? How quickly can you make them? And if you can't do that, if you can't easily manufacture your product in scale, you don't have a product. So that's something you have to remember. You just have a prototype that just works. You haven't figured out the manufacturability. So if one of the part is requiring a lot of manual labor to be successful, and you don't have automation method to do that, most probably you'll have a lot of problems on the way. So that's this manufacturability is very important, and this is an example again. Okay, so you'll see, as I said, this t-shirt, because that's been a part of my PhD a lot. And in this t-shirt we use conductive fabric, as I said, and those fabrics, as you can see, these thin lines, they are cut into 3mm strips, and they're folded like that, and they are covered in
Recording
this tape.
stopped.
called kinesiology tape. They are used for sports people for recovering purposes. They place them on their body, and that fabric is sewn into the t-shirt, and you have this final t-shirt. So you'll think this is like very simple thing, but this. And how did we do that? We bought this big fabrics, big conductive fabrics, and it has different names. I mean, it has how it was made, in front side and back side. It has two different lines and grain. And when we cut it, we have to cut directly. And when you think about that, if you want to cut 3 millimeter thickness fabric straight through either straight or 90-degree angle through this way, how can we do that? Can we use a scissor by hand? It won't work. Or how can we do that? So for research purposes, we can carefully cut by hand, use a scissor, cut one. Even one fails, we just throw it and cut another by hand. That's fine. What happens if you need thousands of them? We can't cut by hand. So what else do we have? Can we do laser cutting, machine cutting? So what happens if you do laser cutting? To ensure that the line and width is consistent. Can you make sure all of your sensor is a 3 millimeter width? And we have to conceal this device because it's transmitting current there, and to secure it from washing. So we use this kinesiology tape, as you can see. And how to conceal? Can you just fold it by hand or using a machine there? And how to attach it here? Can you sew it there? And as you can see, this looks like a little bit sticky, right? And we have found that problem actually. So this needle gets stuck when we start sewing this. So we couldn't sew fast enough. We have to regularly clean the needle. So that needle problem gave us a lot of problems as well. So even if you think something like very small is small problems, they are not small problems when you make things in large scale. They'll become big things. And they are more important than your algorithms. Your algorithm can wait actually. So those things will become big problems later. So that's lesson 2. And the other thing about healthcare, you have to fall into one of these 5 days. So it's death, disease, disability, diagnosis, $4. And by death, I mean you don't have to cause death, it's just prevents death. So if you can prevent somebody's dying, that's a real good reason to sell the product. People will buy it because that would save them from dying. It's obvious. And that's quite likely the highest priority here. And second one is diseases. So if your device can cure disease, let's say you have developed a neurostimulation device you can plug into your brain and can cure Parkinson's. So that's quite good, and to cure disease, and that's kind of like the second priority. And if your device can aid a disability, let's say somebody to talk, if your device can allow them to talk, that's good. If somebody can't hear, if you like a cochlear implant, if somebody can't hear, if your device allows them to hear, people pay money to, and if somebody can't walk, same concept. So should aid disabled people. And if it can perform diagnosis similar to what PCR working in with COVID. So if you can diagnose a condition with your device, people still would pay. And for some reason, either through one of these reasons or completely unrelated reason, the device can generate dollars. Yeah, still that's fine. that's a good reason to make a device. And this TMB, that means thousands, millions, and billions. And depending on where it was, it could change its location. So I have placed that into the last place, but depending on if it is millions or billions, it would move into the front. So if it's billion, it's definitely front. So
recording in progress.
Yeah, depends how much dollars you can make. So in summary for this slide, what I wanted to tell you is if your device is just monitoring, that doesn't fall into any of those categories. So let's say you have made a device, heart rate monitor. So it just monitors and report you what's your heart rate. And it doesn't add much value to the person because it just reporting things. And reporting animal condition doesn't add much value, but if you can diagnose something using that heart rate data, and that's adding value, that's giving information for data, which can be actionable information, that's a good product. So if you're thinking about making a monitoring device, don't do it, convert it to do some of the Ds I mentioned. And dollars alone will only work as long as it has the potential to generate millions or billions. As you might think, nobody will bother if it's just thousands. Yeah. And this is lesson 4 about pseudo innovation, because this is like, you can see this everywhere. Pseudo innovation. I can point out an example from Sri Lanka, but I didn't do it because people would think it's like targeted. So I got an example from outside, from Canada, I think. So this is like a ventilator device made by University of Waterloo. So the idea is to make this device available during COVID time, let's say, and they have made this device. So it has, obviously it's working. It has a pump, it has these control panels, probably these things are 3D printed, and these things are sourced from their local hardware store somewhere, and they have probably hand assembled this one. And those parts probably go some normal like hobby parts store somewhere, not to detectable probably. So they have this device, that's fine. And the thing with innovation is it's not about idea. So you can have idea, you can have a working product, but that's only about the 10% effort required to have a well-made product, a sellable product. And it's similar scenario like if you want to go to Colombo and you are at Kaduga now, the same situation as from Kandy to Colombo. If you're at Kaduga now, you are not at Colombo, so you still have to go a lot of distance. And the product journey, this probably this much about, that's your working prototype, and everything else you have to figure out. There's a lot of things. And that is what I call pseudo innovation, because people would make something and claim that they have a new device or they have something significant, but they haven't figured out a lot of other things. So what are those lot of other things? I think I have zoomed in views. So this is about productions in parts, enclosures, life cycle, quality assurance, PCBs if you have, and the parts, where do you buy? Are you importing parts? Do you have restrictions? So let's say your device is made in China and there's restrictions in your parts. You can't ship them to China because of some trade trade-related things. So where do you buy your parts? How do you make sure your quality is good? Do you have quality assurance set up? And what's the availability, life cycle of your part? Is it like obsolete parts? Will it be obsolete in next 2-3 years? You won't be able to buy. And how many parts are available now? And how many sellers are there? Can you change your alternative sellers? And version control of your parts? And what happens if the vendor moves into a new part and stop production in your current parts? What's the solution? And how do you figure out your supply chain? How do you ship your products from your original parts store or parts supplier to you? And how much time does it take? Are you taking shipping through via airmail or normal ships? And how much time it takes? All those things you have to consider only about parts. And about the enclosure, do you have to consider IP ratings? That means like a splash proofing, those things. And what's the cost and material of your enclosure? Are you using plastic, nylon, or metal? How do you make that in a factory? Who is designing that? And how do you make sure the biocompatibility if somebody is wearing it? And does it irritate the skin, or does it have flammability properties? So all those things you have to consider about enclosures. And the life cycle of your product. So how do you do the version control? If you upgrade to your next generation, so you have version 1, what happens if you upgrade to version 2? So how do you make sure your hardware compatibility with your software? And how do you make sure your software compatibility with your hardware, like with different versions? To cut your compatibility, or is there a way to retain your compatibility? And how do you make sure your quality assurance in production, like training people? If you're hiring new people, how do you train them? Who is making those documents? And quality assurance, if you are applying for quality assurance, those ISO numbers, who is good doing those things? And if you're making PCBs, who is doing assembly? Are you doing it or somebody else doing it? And where are you going to make PCBs? Is it China or same country? And what's the risk of making those PCBs in-house or outside country? And yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of things to sort out to make this production line going on. So unless you figure out all of these things, you can't have like a streamlined production. And about employers, so how do you train them to follow the medical standards? And how do you make sure you have enough documents or standard of procedure, I think? How do you make sure they are available? Who is writing them? And where do you hire more people if you want? How do you hire manufacturing people? How do you hire engineers? How do you hire recruiting people? And where do you source those salaries? Is somebody paying you, or are you getting a loan? And how do you make sure you have enough money to pay for those people until you get income? And how do you make sure you can keep them? And about the market, how are you going to ship your products? Where and how are you going to advertise them? And who are your potential clients? Is it a business you are making a deal, or are you selling directly to the public? And how do you plan to get feedback for your device? Is there a way to get feedback from the possible clients for your device? And how do you make sure you are honoring your warranty? Or how do you make sure you are handling returns? If somebody want to return it, what's the procedure? And what's the IP issues and conflicts? Let's say if you want to sell your product to USA and there's a IP like a patent directly competing with you, can you sell that in USA? Is there an issue? So how do you sort that out? And how do you make your market to medical clearance? Let's say if you want to sell something in Australia, you have to get there's authority, you have to submit your functionality of your device and get approval. Otherwise, you can't sell medical devices here. So how do you get those medical clearances? So all of these things, unless you do it, as you can see, there's a lot of things to do. Unless you do it, you don't have a product. So that's something you have to figure out as well before you call out about an invention. Okay, so I just want to show you that there's a lot of things you might haven't considered. And the other one is this invisible wall you have to break or push towards these doctors, nurses, midwives, and other professionals or technicians. So you might be thinking that you have a great idea, you have a new device that would make their lives easy or the people's life easy. But the problem is they most of the times they are perfectly fine without your product. So they are still doing their job. They're happy with their salary. They're happy with what they're working. So with your idea, you have to break that barrier and show them that it's worthwhile considering your device. And you will face this huge resist from medical professionals. And why it is, there might be different reasons, but there might be more than these reasons. These are things I have thought of. So unless it is like obvious or proven or forced by their higher authority, let's say doctors are working in a hospital, and hospital decided to move into a new machine, new type of machine. And the doctors, they don't have any control over that. They have to train for the new machine. So unless they are forced or proven and training for a new tool or system, they would consider it waste of time because they are very busy people and they won't bother into training into a new system, your new device. And even if they change it, it wouldn't change their salary. So salary is like a big motivation for everybody. And so replacing your product with another product, that doesn't affect their salary, and there's no motivation for that as well. So if you can prove that using your device, their income can be increased. Let's say there's a lab, like a diagnosis lab, and you can prove that for normal tests, if it takes 10 minutes, and if you can prove that you can do it in 5 minutes, that means they can do more tests, right? And they can get more income, and that would increase their profit. So you have to show that. And the other one is trust issues, because when familiar with one sort of device, they'll figure out what's going on with those devices and what are the drawbacks, what are the good things. And when they're comfortable, they won't like changing into a new device. They won't go into unknown territory. So they're comfortable with their current one. They won't, they have a lot of trust issues. And maybe you are trying to solve a low priority item for them. For your perspective, that might be the biggest issue, but from their perspective, from their view, you might be solving very, very insignificant problem for them. Those things could contribute to this resist, and you should be able to, if you plan to make a medical device, you should be able to address those ones. And yeah, those are about like my major points. So these are like general advices for you. One thing is this leaving this hobbyist mindset. You might have conflicting opinions about this as well, but in my point, it's okay to use these devices like Arduino, ESP32, and other common hobbyist ICs for proof of concept products. That means you have a proof that your system works. That's there. So, but don't bring those things beyond that, because those could be real problems in power critical cases or less task critical cases. And so you should be able to fairly easily move into this optimized purpose ICs from vendors with predictable production lifetime. So that would make your life much easier in your actual production. So it's good to have this for quick prototyping or proof of concept, but don't don't think that you can bring those in production. There are a lot of actually products out there that uses these ESP32s or Arduinos inside them. They are using them for production. They are using them for sell items, even some monitors like that. That's fine, but we are talking about medical devices, so you can't build those kind of sophisticated items with these cartons. So you have to move in, and it's not that difficult as well. It's fairly straightforward, and I think you should go from your comfort zone to those places if you want to improve. And the other one is you should, I think, creating a niche product. That means you're very specific and you're addressing very tiny section of the market, but only you addressing that problem. That's about niche product. And if you have that niche, that means you have fairly consistent market, fairly consistent clients. But the thing with these niche products, you can sell them consistently, but avoid niche parts, like parts that can do specific things, but no other part can do, something like that. For example, I have put this Max 3001 IC because it can calculate heart rate on the chip itself. Okay, so that's quite rare to have a chip like that. So this chip can acquire ECG, compute your heart rate using ECG waveform, and give you what's the current heart rate. And if you are using this chip, the problem is what happens if they discontinue this chip. So if you have made the heart rate detection device using this chip, at like you will completely rely on one single, and that's not a good thing in product. So in an event of production halt, unavailability of the obsolete part. So it doesn't have to be their stop production. Maybe they have product like million of those and sold all of them to Apple or something. So you don't have any say on those transactions. You just don't have the device or the part. So what can you do? You can't do anything. So you have a lot of production problems if you go with these niche parts. So you should either secure enough parts with these ones or have alternatives to these parts, alternative methods. Either you implement your own algorithm for calculating these heart rate or have some alternative ways. So that's another advice. And this is the last one. Software is very important, regardless of what you think. And if you don't do your software at the beginning, so this is mostly like your research stage. In research, we are thinking we can change the software. It doesn't matter. We make the software a little bit messy. Nobody's looking at it except the paper reviewers. So we are writing this we are writing this bad software. But the problem is, if you want to transform it into real product, you will be building on top of that software. But you'll think that it's easy to change software, and you'll think we'll change it later. But in reality, you'll keep adding more things over that, and at one point you'll realize it's not sustainable. It'll break everything. Yeah, that's the last thing I wanted to mention. Yeah, and thank you. If you want to get contact, yeah, that's the email. Yeah, that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
That was a very informative session, and thank you very much, sir, for your time. And we have one small notice for our audience. Please fill the form in the Zoom chat. it will really help to improve these sessions in the future. Um, I think we learned a lot about medical devices and healthcare in general, and the amazing engineering behind it. Thanks again, sir, and thank you very much for the audience. We'll see you again in another valuable session like this. Until then, stay safe, stay tuned. Good night.
Thank you.